I can't even think of any examples of this off the top of my head, but I feel like I saw like 100 movies in the 80s and 90s where somebody gets up to give some empowered speech and they start to talk to the bad people and they're like, you know what, Mom, you did this and this and this. And Mom, with her wine and her sparkly outfit and her fancy golf friends, is like, oh, well, did I? Oh, that's so nice. But you know what, Mom? You were also this. And then the speech turns and it's like, finally, here's some catharsis. We're going to tell you how the thing actually is. And that's what I feel like we're getting in Matthew chapter 23. This speech that Jesus gives that consumes the entire chapter of 23 starts out with an affirmation of the Pharisees' potential to do good, the potential to speak with some authority, maybe even derived from Moses himself. I even see here, as we talked about yesterday, some sort of tacit affirmation of the synagogue system. I mean, Jesus went to synagogues. He taught in synagogues. He's acknowledging this is a vehicle for connection with God, connection with the scriptures, for an understanding and a preparation for what the Messiah will be when he shows up. I think the best way to read the opening of Matthew 23 is that Jesus is genuinely acknowledging the goodness and effectiveness and potential of those things. But then here comes the pivot. Matthew 23:1. Then Jesus said to the crowd and to his disciples, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, so you must obey them and do everything they tell you. And you kind of picture all of the fancy religious elite crowd with their drinks and their skinny glasses that they're holding casually between their pointer finger and middle finger, swirling the little bits around inside. You kind of picture them all like clapping with the little bit of their palm that is still exposed while they maintain the drink and don't spill any with their other hand. Like, oh, Pharisees, that is so good for you. That is so fair. It is so nice to see you finally get some credit in front of everyone. And that is nice of you to say, Jesus. And then it pivots. But don't do what they do, for they don't practice what they preach. Okay, that's weird. Clapping stops. Cue the fainting and the pearl-clutching gasps. Well, I never. They tie up heavy loads and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Maybe we're so desensitized to everybody just coming right out in public and burning everybody down for everything now because it's kind of no consequences for anything that anybody says at this point in our public discourse. But I think this would have been weird. I think a character this credible who had bided his time, kept his mouth shut, but who spoke with authority, not as the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. He sounded different. And the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they're not growing people's hands back. They're not raising the dead. They're not driving out demons. They're not calming the storm. They're not walking on water. They're not healing the multitudes. They're not creating matter out of non-matter and feeding thousands upon thousands of people with gajillions of witnesses to all of this breaking of the law of time and space, to all of this wisdom and brilliance and truth. Jesus has unbelievable amounts of credibility at this point in ways that if you were just to draw up a blueprint for what would it be like for me to step into the public sphere and say things and have people actually believe me, like maybe if I could like fly or shoot eye lasers or something, people would be like, wow, that kind of rises above the rest of the political social discourse of this day. I want to hear more about what flying eye laser man has to say. That's how you draw it up in your mind. Like, what would it take to get people's attention? Well, Jesus does that kind of and even more impressive stuff. And finally, we get what he's actually thinking, and it's this. Don't do what the Pharisees do because they themselves don't even practice what they preach. Or to put it more succinctly, the charge is hypocrisy. Now, a couple times a week, I try to get in a basic old man rant, and here's one for today. There was a time not so long ago when hypocrisy was bad, and you didn't want to be accused of that or have it easily demonstrated that you were that, because everyone from all sides of our silly little ongoing conversation could agree that being a hypocrite was undesirable and that being consistent in your ideas meant those ideas were more defensible and maybe more likely to be, I don't know, right and moral and good. But in the age of raw, burn it down, scorched earth, lie as hard as you have to politics and power grabbing, which I guess is just what we're going to do right now instead, virtue, like consistency, is not in any point a concern. I mean, just use the memory hole, say whatever you have to say, make things up if you need to. And so in our little moment that we're having right now, the charge of hypocrisy might be like, okay, like, I guess whatever. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But in most of human history, that charge would have had really serious teeth. And I think it did here as well. And I say as an aside again, when I say stuff like that, you might be like, oh yeah, he's criticizing that group or that. I'm just criticizing the whole dang thing. Those are not meant to be partisan remarks. Those are observations I make about what I believe to be a very evidently disappointing state of conversational affairs amongst all of us right now. And I understand that we all, including me, have our little part in allowing that to go sideways. Hopefully we can make it better at some point, not the point of what we're talking about here. Moving on. He goes on to say that this hypocrisy isn't just they say one thing and then they do another, which in and of itself should be disqualifying and is ick. But he goes on to say that they do it to exploit you, that somehow you are the product of their religion, that getting you to bear these heavy burdens and lug them around like the Israelite slaves of old building the pyramids for the pharaohs with the garbage building materials he gave them, they're heaping this enslaving bondage on all of you. Do you see it, people? Wake up. Open your eyes. Look at who these people are. Look at what they're doing to you. They are not your friends. Their job is to connect you with the life abundant that exists in the God they supposedly serve, but instead what they do is weigh you down with burdens that they themselves don't want to carry. And after they weigh you down, they won't even do anything to lift that off. I know this technique. I've been around weird, screwed up, screwy religion. Heck, to my unending shame, I've probably helped build it at times. But come on, you and I, we know the tools of the trade here. Guilt, gaslighting, weird power dynamics, creating this bizarre gerrymandered set of moral standards that somehow magically just wrap around all of the problems, issues, or objectionable things that the leaders might do or feel, but that just so happen to perfectly wrap around and include all of the things that you might get wrong or what your problems might be. It's abuse and it's disgusting. And if you've experienced that in church, it's crap. I am sorry. I've experienced that in church. I've been on the receiving end of this weird, creepy, controlling, bizarre, twisted mutation of something that goes by the name of Christianity, but is not. It looks nothing like Christ. It looks everything like the Pharisees. And a lot of people in my space right now just kind of want to burn down the whole thing because they've been burned by that as well. And I get it. It takes you to a dark place with other people. It takes you to a dark place even thinking about singing the songs you sing in church or reading the Bible verses you read in church. It takes you to a dark place with God. It takes you to a dark place with life and love and aging and death and everything. That perversion of the values of the kingdom that if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, has been soul murder for so many of us. And so often the most natural response seems to be to completely throw out the baby with the bathwater. But if you have been burned by that stuff, if you've seen it, if you've lived it, if you've dealt with it, if you're still weird because of it, this passage should ring true and life-giving to you. This is the guy for whom the religion is named. This is the guy who is the mediator, the go-between between God and man, the maker of all things, and finite, frail, broken, busted up little us. And he is walking right up to the face of that kind of evil. And after trying in the last chapter to persuade them to knock it off and bend the knee to what is real and true and repent of their mess, now he pivots and in front of everybody, he calls out their evil, destructive garbage that has actual consequences. The kind of stuff they were getting wrong is not cute. It's not the kind of stuff that is consequence-free and like, oh, they just have some like weird opinions and that's just how they come at it. No, it's so much more than that. The words of Christ are life-giving. The hypocritical words of the Pharisees are life-siphoning. The words of Christ come with freedom. The words of these guys, as Jesus specifically says right here, bring about bondage, suffering, slavery. And any of you, my friends, who've been burned by this, look forward to the rest of chapter 23, because there's a whole lot of catharsis ahead as Jesus calls out this ugliness that you've been on the receiving end of. By the time we get done with this chapter, there will be a clear division between ugly things done in the name of Christ and the values and character of Christ himself. Maybe there's a few of you listening who, like me, got handed the microphone a little bit earlier than maybe we should have. Maybe with the best of intentions, maybe not always with the best of intentions. Did and said stupid stuff with the metaphorical authority of Moses' seat. that looks a little bit more like it's born out of motivations similar to that of the Pharisees than motivations and a character similar to that of Christ. Maybe you drag that around with you a little bit too. Maybe it eats at you that you were in that kind of spot and you contributed to what is gross about it and not what is beautiful about it. I own that. I feel sadness and hurt about ways that along the line I've contributed to the stuff that isn't beautiful and isn't good too. Matthew 23 is sobering stuff. It's getting real. We're going to try to keep it light and have fun with it. We're going to try to enjoy the catharsis of it. But I think it's also right and good to see judgment flashing in the eyes of Jesus here and to be sobered by that for ourselves as well. This is powerful stuff. I look forward to breaking the rest of it down with you as we move along here. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. We'll do this again soon.